So I've been making a lot of videos about self-knowledge and self-exploration, but all this talk about the 2016 election, and while I was reading this little handbook last night with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution in it, just sort of going over it again, I remembered something I learned about 2 years ago, a concept that exists and is built into the Constitution and the way that our country was founded, that I was surprised I didn't know about with all the 12 years of government schools and college. I mean, I'm a college graduate, and this is a concept I learned about accidentally on my own maybe 2 years ago. So, considering that, I figured I would sort of make a video about it. And actually, something that I read in here really inspired me, and I thought I would sort of recap it for people. So, the intro into this little booklet that has the Bill of Rights in it really sums it up really well. And it reminds us that man was the one that created the Constitution and formed this government. So the Constitution was created by man. And then, using the Constitution, we created the rest of the structures of government that we currently have. And then government creates more things like corporations and further breaks down and makes society more complicated and also more useful for the people. But we have to remember that first there's man. Man creates the Constitution. The Constitution outlines how the government is actually created and structured. And then corporations and all the other legal entities are created at the bottom underneath from the government that is created from the Constitution, which man has created. And I'm going to set aside anything that I totally believe that may not exist right now. And I'm going to just talk about what already exists. Structures and things built into what we already have. Everyone's screaming about hope and change and wanting now more change. And, I could bet no real change is going to happen. So constantly doing the same thing and getting the same result and asking for change and asking for something new to happen is idiocracy or idiocy. And this really reminded me a really succinct way of actually saying it. So remembering and keeping in mind the fact that man always comes first. Humans come first. We created the rest of the structures we all agreed to live with. This booklet, I just want to read a couple of sentences. It says really, really succinctly, the base of the power was always to remain with we the people. But unfortunately, it was lost to those leaders acting in the name of government, such as politicians, bureaucrats, judges, lawyers, etc. And as a result, eventually, America began to function like a democracy, not a republic. Everyone screams about we need a democracy, we need to bring democracy to the rest of the world. No, democracy is bullying by the majority of the minority. And that's why the founders created a republic. And there's a big difference, and people don't understand. A democracy is dangerous because it's a one-vote system. So if there's 3 of us and 2 of us, the majority rules that we need to beat you with a stick, you third person, then that's it. One vote, and you get beaten. Sucks to be you. But in a republic, we don't allow this kind of bullying. There's a mechanism already existing in the current Constitution and the way the framers framed it that checks the power of the majority. A republic, which is a 3-vote system, is different. And I'll explain the 3 votes. And I might have to break this video up so it's short since everyone's attention span is so small. But let me go on at least and discuss the first. 3 votes to check tyranny, not just 1. American citizens have not been informed of their other 2 votes. We all know the 1 vote we have, which doesn't seem to mean much. So let's talk about the others. The first vote is at the polls on Election Day, when we pick those who are to represent us in the seats of government. We're all busy. We need to sort of find experts and have them represent us, and also have a way of checking their power, because what happens if they don't do what they say they will do? What can be done if those elected officials just don't perform as promised or prescribed? Well, the second two votes are most effective, and the most effective means by which the common people of any nation have ever had in controlling those appointed to serve them in government. So let's discuss the second vote. That comes when you serve on a grand jury. People don't really understand, and I didn't really understand what grand juries were for. But before anyone can be brought to trial for a capital or some kind of serious crime by those acting in the name of government, permission must be obtained from people serving on the grand jury. And that's what a grand jury is. It's a group of citizens, regular citizens, giving permission to the prosecutor to go ahead and move forward with a case, meaning they have looked at the case, looked at the facts the prosecutor has, and have decided that this is not frivolous, or that it is frivolous and it shouldn't go on. And that is the first step. So as a citizen, even if, something, for example, like marijuana is illegal, and I get caught with marijuana, and I am going to be brought to trial for distribution and all kinds of stuff. Well, if the jury is like, there's no harm that was done, she really wasn't distributing, maybe she was growing a couple of plants or whatever, and even if there's a law that some bureaucrat has decided to put on the books because they need to keep the prisons full, because they have contracts with the private, prison operators to keep them full and keep the beds full, and the prosecutor needs a win, maybe he's new on the job and he wants to prove himself, and he's like, oh, I'm going to convict her, and I'm going to get my first case ever is going to be a win. Before he gets to that point, and that overzealous, attitude that's self-serving, the grand jury is going to tell him, no, there's not enough evidence this was for distribution, or that there's not enough evidence that there's any harm, and they won't even let him go on, hopefully. But that's the second vote. It checks the power of those in power. Those in power to impose punishment and hardship on the other average citizens. So if we all understand as average citizens that any one of us could be swept off the streets by some overzealous prosecutor arresting us under some false allegations or trumped up charges or whatever, and how do we protect ourselves? Well, hopefully I can count on my fellow citizens to protect me, as they should be able to count on me to be informed and protect them should they get swooped up in some overzealous prosecutors, overzealous action towards me. So a grand jury will tell him yes or no if this is a true crime we need to move forward with. A grand jury's purpose is to protect the public from those overzealous prosecutors. And then the third vote in a republic that a citizen has to check power of government and those elected is the most powerful. And that is when you're acting as a jury member during a courtroom trial. This is why jury trials were set up, because we don't want some overzealous judge looking for, say he's retiring next week and this is the last case he's judging. Well, he doesn't want to go out on a loss. Or maybe someone else is bribing him to make sure that he pushes and gets a conviction. We can't have one person be that powerful. Not the prosecutor, not the judge, not any of the law enforcement, which are the official guns. We have given them that power, and so we need to check it. Or it just goes, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this third vote, it's not an actual vote, but it is a more powerful vote than anything you do on election day, is when you serve on a jury, on a regular trial jury. And what happens is you not only get to try the facts of the case, but you get to also try the law. So that's kind of the buck stops here. Check on overzealous government power. It's in this setting that each individual juror has more power than any president, than all of Congress, and than anyone else that is appointed or elected to some higher office. And the reason is Congress can legislate and make laws. The president or some other bureaucrat also can sign executive orders or create or issue directives or guidelines or regulations. Judges may instruct people and make decisions. Cops may arrest people. All these people have all this power that we have given them voluntarily given them to sort of, regulate society. And how do we check that? How do we check it? As a jury member, one person can make that all irrelevant by voting no, voting not guilty, and hanging the jury. A hung jury means not a guilty, not a not guilty. It's just there is not a unanimous decision. No matter what the judge instructs you to do, no matter what the attorneys instruct you to do, usually they'll say, the letter of the law is this. It's illegal to grow, more than one plant of marijuana per household, let's say, or whatever, or it's illegal to grow any of this particular plant. Well, if the society thinks that's ridiculous, and it's ridiculous to punish someone and to ruin their lives because of something they do in their private time, in their private home, that's not hurting anyone, and there is no victim, there is no property damage, there's no victim, there's no harm done, then how is it a crime? Because someone, again, decided it's a crime? Because someone decided alcohol is okay, but, marijuana's not, or whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be something like that. It could be anything minor. A juror not only looks at the facts of the case and whether the person did it or not, and whether they did it and it violates what the current statutes are, the juror, most importantly, judges the validity of the regulation, the law, the statute, whatever it is. And that's so important. It makes such a difference in that person's life. It sets a precedent for future juries and future trials. When prohibition was going on in the U.S., eventually so many juries exercised their right of jury nullification by voting, by making sure juries were hung juries and no verdict was returned. So many cases were thrown out like that the government eventually stopped prosecuting, and eventually prohibition ended because the citizens stood up and said, this does not make sense. We do not have unlimited funds. We do not have to torture people for no reason. They put themselves in the shoes of the other person being persecuted, being tried, and they said, this is ridiculous. Yeah, maybe they broke the law or went against what the statute says, but who created that stupid statute? It's ridiculous. It's overreaching. It's unconstitutional, and it's harassment of the regular person. And that's how you check government power. Currently, it's already built in. We don't need further change. We don't need anything new. We already have it. We were given this powerful gift by the framers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And unfortunately, because we're all products of government schools and the system that doesn't want to lose power by teaching you how to check it, nobody teaches us about this. Nobody teaches us about what a grand jury really does and what rights and responsibilities, not just rights, the responsibility to not try people frivolously is what a grand jury has. And then if it goes past that and you're in a trial and you are on a jury, you are judging the law. If just one juror votes not guilty for any reason, there is no conviction and no punishment at the end of that trial. And a precedent is set. Instead of a precedent that is harmful and will result in further cases, frivolous cases being brought against other citizens and more harassment, it checks the government and the prosecutor and says, no, don't bring any more of these frivolous cases. This is a ridiculous law and we will not convict. So you might as well not even have it. Because I don't care what somebody writes in a piece of paper or, in a statute. If it's ridiculous and unconstitutional, I still have the power to say that. Because those acting in the name of government must come before the common man and get permission to enforce laws. And get permission to enforce laws. And if these laws we feel are overreaching or unconstitutional or just complete harassment, then we just take it away from them by nullifying the jury. But people giving out booklets like this in front of courthouses get arrested. Prosecutors and lawyers who even mention the fact that a jury has the right to nullify and say, even if there's a law that says you can't grow marijuana in your basement, and this person clearly grew marijuana in their basement, it's a stupid law. It's a law that is not protecting anyone from harm because no harm was done. And this person should not be tried under this law because this law is harassment and unconstitutional. And more people do that, eventually, just like during Prohibition, they'll stop prosecuting and harassing people and they'll realize, wow, the population has woken up. Even though we tried so hard not to let them, learn about this right they already had built in. You are above the law because the law is just a piece of paper some random politician wrote down. And you're not above natural law. If you kill me, obviously, you don't have to write that down. If you rob me, you cause me any sort of harm, you kidnap me, anything, you run over my bushes, you cause me property damage, whatever. Those are things clearly you don't even have to write down. There needs to be restitution. But some arbitrary bullshit of like I said, grew a plant in your basement. So, who says what kind of plant is okay or not? As a juror in a trial setting, when it comes to your individual vote of innocence or guilty, you truly are answerable only to yourself, to God, if you believe in God, and to your own conscience, and to the future, to your kids, and to the country that you're going to leave for them. Are you going to leave them a country that's, like Orwellian 1984 style, where the government basically has all the power and there's nothing you can do about it? Because that's where we're going. If we don't learn about the rights we already have, we don't have to ask them for rights. We already have them. We just have to learn about them, educate our friends and family about them, and express how important they are, which is why I chose to make this long video. I just really hope people really learn about what grand juries do and the rights they have and what jury nullification is. And I just can't stress the fact that this is such a gift our founding fathers gave us, that whether you are an anarchist or a constitutionalist, a Democrat or a Republican, it doesn't matter. The fact is, none of us want to see our fellow man harassed and tried for frivolous bullshit crimes like, making wine or growing marijuana in your basement or a myriad of other things that are just ridiculous with no victim. And the more juries nullify and know their rights and are not intimidated by judges and lawyers, the freer we will be. So exercise the rights that the founding fathers already gave you. It's all you have to do. And the future will be better.